Well, welcome everyone to the Kidlit Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of Children's Book Insider, and thank you for joining us tonight or on the replay, however you watch the Kidlit Social. We've got a really interesting conversation today, and I think it's going to benefit everybody who's here. So good for you for showing up. If you're new to us and want to subscribe to our newsletter, Children's Book Insider, which we have been publishing for 31 years, actually a little over 31 years now. We have a special deal for you, writeforkids.org/CBI for our socialites, $5 a month. Get you the newsletter every month delivered to your inbox. Full access to our membership site, the CBI Clubhouse, which has all kinds of information from 31 years of us writing about writing. And each episode, each issue has a special above the slush pile code for either an agent or editor that you can submit and jump over the slush pile. And what's really exciting about this is we are changing the way we do that with our January issue. I will tell you more about that as we get closer. We will still have above the slush pile codes with each issue, but we're going to change it a little bit in a way that I think is going to actually appeal to a lot of editors. And we will get even more editors who will be participating, which is going to be awesome. Also, on our Kidlit Social in December, I believe it's December 7th, it's the first Tuesday in December, we are going to have my contributor, Lynn Marie, who compiles the above the slush pile codes for us, as well as an agent and editor on as guests on the social to talk about how to know if your manuscript submission ready and why so many editors and agents sometimes close their doors to submissions and how we can change that. So that's going to be a really, really great one. And I hope you're here for that. If you're on our list, you'll get notified. Otherwise, just keep an eye out on Facebook. And the link you use to get here today is always the link that you can use to get to the Kidlit Social every first and third Tuesday of the month. So bookmark this and you'll know where to go. Okay, now we're going to have Celebrates, where we celebrate the great news from you. And I have a really good one this week. Latina Ramsey was one of 12 writers selected in the inaugural Black Creatives Revisions Workshop, sponsored by We Need Diverse Books. And she will receive training from a small faculty of esteemed Black authors to complete revisions of her middle grade manuscript, work with a writing mentor and attend workshops on the craft of revision, and then submit her manuscript to a team of editors at Penguin Random House. So Latina, that is amazing. And congratulations. I know you're in the process of doing all this work now. And if any of you are curious about this program, you can go to the diversebooks.org website, which is for We Need Diverse Books. That's their URL, and click on programs and then the Black Creatives Revisions Workshop. You'll find out more information and you can get on their list to be notified when these things open up for next year. So, and you'll also see who won this year. So this is quite an honor, Latina. Congrats. And please keep in touch and let us know how that goes, your submissions with Penguin Random House. So I want to hear your good news. Email me a mail at writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line. And we will feature you on a future Kidlit Social. It could be any kind of news, a book publication, you finished your first draft, you found a critique partner, any step along the way. We want to celebrate with you because that makes it all fun and worthwhile. And I have something I want to celebrate. So Children's Book Insider is hosting a fundraiser for India Transformed. It's an organization that works with the very poorest class in India, and we are raising $22,000 by January 1st, 2022, to buy books for a private school for K through 12 that gives scholarships to these kids, textbooks for a new college library that India Transformed has built, and again, gives scholarships to these young adults so they can get a college education, and 12 childcare centers that provide after school enrichment for these kids. And they have no books. And so $22,000 can actually buy books for all these facilities in India. And our goal is to raise that money, and we need your help. So you can go to this link on your screen, bit.ly/books for India, to learn more about India Transformed, to learn more about this campaign. You will see a video of an interview I did with the executive director of this organization, Ruth Brodeen, who I've known for over 25 years, so I can vouch for this organization. And every little bit helps. And I also ask you to share this with anyone who you think would also want to donate. You can also give a donation in the name of someone for a holiday gift or in memory of someone, and however you want to do that. And also I want to tell you, the pictures that you see on your screen here, these are pictures of actual children in this program who will directly benefit from your donations. And we have videos from a couple of them on this page where you can find out more information. So please help us out. And I know that we can do this. We can raise this money by the end of 2021, going into 2022, and really change the lives of so many kids. Okay, our link of interest this week, a great article by Jessica Faust of Bookends Literary Agency called "Where Have All the Editors Gone?" Because people are always saying, why don't editors edit anymore? Well, they do. And she knows because she works with them as a literary agent. So this article is really great. It talks about why it seems like they don't edit, but they actually do edit. And here's why their comments might feel kind of broad and non-specific if you get a rejection letter from them, but what you can do to make their job easier. So I gave you a direct link there, bit.ly/editors gone, and you can read that, and it's a very interesting post. Okay, now I have my amazing guest today. Janine Bolon is an author, podcaster, course creator, and publicity coach. She's had a long and very multifaceted career, which we're going to hear about in just a minute. But her newest book is Author Podcasting, Be a Standout Guest While Taking Your Book on a Virtual Tour. So today she's going to share her expertise on how authors can promote themselves via virtual podcast tours, and also by creating really standout media kits. We'll talk about what that is and why you need one. And Janine herself is the host of several podcasts, including the Thriving Solopreneur Show, 3-Minute Money Tip, and the Writer's Hour Creative Conversations with Janine Bolon. So Janine, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today.
It's always so delightful to be able to talk to authors. And I just want to say, go, Martina, congratulations. I just don't think we celebrate enough those little wins, right? You know, the fact that you have these little wins. And I just love a show like yourself that you guys support that. So well done, Laura, as well, that you help remind us, because we sometimes think you have to have the book in hand, you know, before we should celebrate. And I disagree, you know, but it's lovely to see you doing that too.
Yes. Well, we love our celebrates. And, you know, writing is such a solitary activity that having these community celebrations is so important to remind us that we're all in this together and pulling for each other. So.
I totally agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Janine, why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, because you do so many different things.
Well, one of the things is I'd like people to realize that the very first book I published was because my college students were begging me to write the book on money. And so Money Is Not Just for Rich People was my very first book. It was published in 2005. And after 32 rejection letters over the course of 6 months, I quit trying to go with a quote, quote, normal publishing house. And I did something absolutely out of the box and did vanity publishing, because that's what self-publishing was called then,
Right.
because you were so vain that instead of doing the hard work, right, do the hard work and get into the real publishing house, here you are printing it off yourself and blah, blah, blah. Well, it was because my students were begging me for the material, and I just wanted to be able, I got tired of, remember Kinko's
Yes.
copies? I was tired of going to Kinko's copies and constantly doing that. So I printed my own book, and it was the best thing I could have ever done. I never saw myself as an author. But then after 2005, I caught on to this really cool thing that made me leave my MySpace account. It was called YouTube. And YouTube in 2006 was like, blew my mind. It was a very different platform than it is today. But I started reading books on YouTube. And you can still find a few of those really old books. And what was funny was people were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. She's so self-aggrandizing. Oh my gosh, go home. You can't even, it was just like horrible hate mail. And what's funny is now people are being paid to read other people's books. And so I'm loving this. I'm loving where we are. And I don't want anyone to have to work as hard as I did. And my goal for you, I was telling Laura about this before we came live, my goal is to be able to cut about 7 years off your learning curve if I can, because I really want you to come out of the gates running when it comes to your own book. And one last thing, thank you for writing your book. And thank you for the message that is behind your book. I don't care if you're fiction, children, nonfiction, how to, it doesn't matter. I absolutely adore books. And I remember my very first library card that I got, and the children's section, I still visit all the time because of this one thing. If you want to learn something new, go to the children's section, because there they won't use big words. They will teach you the lingo in a glossary. They may even highlight in bold in the text what you need to know. And I just want to say, please keep going. If you have a mission or a message with your children's book, I cannot stress enough how important it is that you continue to do your writing. So just had to get that in there about how I'm like, rah, rah, shish kumbah, you guys keep going.
Well, thank you. That's awesome. And I second everything you just said. So that's terrific. So let's talk a little bit about podcasts. Authors, we know that we have to market our own work. Even if you're traditionally published these days, you have to do a lot of your own marketing. And a lot of people think that means I have to get on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, but podcasts are a slightly different beast. And so let's talk a little bit about, first of all, why are they a good promotional vehicle for authors?
Certainly. So I started my radio career in 1987. And I remember when I was asked to be a beta tester for a thing called Blog Talk Radio. And that was back in the dark ages of 2009, as I like to tell people. And one of the things that we were called audio bloggers, like, because you had blogs. Blogs were just coming out, everybody, like 2010, people were really doing blogs. But I was called an audio blogger. And so now we call us podcasters. So for those of us who've been in the biz for a while, it's like, ooh, now we're hip, when before we were the pariahs. So you'll forgive me, the fact that people want me to come out and talk about it is really weird to me, because we were such a pariah for so long, because we were so lazy as authors that we were doing audio blogging rather than doing it right and sitting there and typing the words, right?
Yes.
So that's some of the fun behind that. So what about today, though? Well, there are people running around that have content and they want to share it with others. And they also very much want to bring in guests on the show. And they want somebody like you, whoever you are that's listening, doesn't matter which kind of author you are, they need you as a guest, because their content needful, as I like to say. And because of the content that they're going to be bringing to their other people, you make them look good. And so that's one of the things that we'd like to share with other people, is that podcasts are also very helpful for authors, because if you're kind of nervous about, I don't really know what to do, what to say, you do know what to say about your book and yourself and whatever message you have. You know yourself better than anyone on planet.
Right.
And so to get onto a podcast is you just talking about your most well-known topic, and that is you and the process of your writing, and then whatever the message is in your book. You've got that on lock, right? You can talk to your blue in the face on that, no problem.
Sure.
And so that's why podcasting is easier, because you don't have to worry about video, and you know that people are going to be listening to you. So you're catering to a whole demographic that is unique, because they're audio listeners. They learn best by audio, and they thrive when they're hearing your voice, because then when they go to read your book, they hear your voice. Even if they've heard 100 other voices, they remember your voice with your book. And that was one of the things that was very transformative for me as a university professor, as I learned more and more about my students who were audio learners versus the visual learners. Yeah.
That's very interesting, connecting your voice with your book. And what we like to say at Write for Kids is that marketing is just really communicating with your readers. It's, it's not hawking your wares, it's communicating with your audience. And you're already a communicator as a writer. And this is just another form of communication. And I think a lot of people who might not like the idea of being on video, doing video interviews or doing YouTube, podcasting is less nerve-wracking in some ways, but yet you come across as a human being. Your personality, your passion for your topic, all of that can still come across really nicely in the podcast format, which is great. So let's talk about your book, Author Podcasting, Be a Standout Guest While Taking Your Book on a Virtual Tour. So first of all, what sort of things do you cover in this book? Is this really a how-to book for authors who want to create a virtual podcast tour?
Yeah, I would be happy to talk about my book, but you made a very valid point, and I'm going to go back up. Can we back up a minute?
Sure,
and that
absolutely.
is when you're talking about authors and having your voice, especially children's authors, you hear your characters' voices in your head. And so when you get on a podcast, you don't know you do this, but a lot of authors, when they start talking about John and he's a very big kid, and they actually drop their voice. It's one of the funniest things. And I love it when authors do that, because you do it naturally, because you're hearing John's voice in your head. And then when you talk about Robin and how she's a very dainty thing, and all of a sudden you see these authors transform, even though you're only recording them, but you're on Zoom, so you can see them, right? But it's one of those fun things. And I encourage authors to share with us the voice of your characters, because you hear them crystal clear, so crystal clear that they're waking your butt up at 3:30 a.m. telling you the scene that you wrote for them is totally off the mark, and you've got to change the whole plot of your story.
Absolutely.
Or has that just happened to me? So I just wanted to share that little bit. So but anyhow, the Author Podcasting book, it is actually meant to be an educational tool. If you have to take longer than an hour to read it, I have not done my job well. It's meant to be what they call a content-rich book. And the reason that I chose to write it was because after producing 4 different podcast programs or shows, and we were producing 1 show a week for each show, so it was 16 shows a month. My production team and I just kept running into problems with people who did not know how to present themselves well. They didn't know how to support us as we were promoting them. And I just saw them losing probably 70% of the traction they could get if they would just tweak 2 or 3 little things. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
The first thing is have a media kit. And this is different than what you're going to see. I actually have a slide that I show during my presentations where I say, if you type in how to build a media kit, Google will come up with all these images of what they look like, and they look like speaker one sheets. And I share with people that is inappropriate for now and this day and age. A podcaster wants to have digital media that they can use. So you may not know this, so let me just share real quick. For every image that we create for you, we have to resize it anywhere from 14 to 27 times, depending upon what platform we're presenting it on. So the lovely screen share that Laura did at the very beginning of Janine Bolon, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, that's really well done. Thank you, Laura. You make me look fabulous. and then I immediately am thinking, will that work at 1300 by 1300? Will that work at 17 by 68 by 900? Well, those are the numbers that run through my head because we're on so many different platforms. And guess what? Every platform wants to be its own little process. And so you have to put a different size.
And they don't talk to each other. So
no, they do not. And so you have whole teams of people that are helping you build out these thumbnails. So a media kit, what is that? It is you saying to a podcaster, I know you have a lot going on in your world. Here is everything that has to do with me to help you build better promotional items for me and your show. And you're handing that to them on a golden platter, and they will love you for it. Mm-hmm. So a media kit comes from the old press kits that were created in the 30s and 40s. And it was for broadcast media, which happened to be newspapers, magazines, and the news. That was all we had back in the 30s and 40s. And so press kits were what somebody would say, here you go, we're going to have this event. Here is the press kit. It would be a little cardboard folder. They would open it up. It would be all the information those reporters needed so that they could meet their deadlines for the printed media and the broadcast media of the day, because everybody has deadlines, right? You're writers, you understand. Absolutely. So that's a press kit. The modern day, we call it media kit because, as you know, we have expanded beyond our grandfather's wildest imaginations on how we now broadcast information. So you're going to have multiple copies of a headshot. You're going to have different types of headshots. I always am kind of giggly because I never know what headshot people are going to use. So I didn't know that Laura was going to pick the one that was the blue coat with the tree in the background. You never know from your media kit what people will find as helpful. And I also encourage you as an author to put some stuff down. Do you like kayaking? Is that something you enjoy? Make sure you have some pictures of who you are as a human being, because sometimes in our promotional items, when we write an article about you or we're referring to you or your book, we'll have an action shot right there next to your book. So even the beauty of you being a children's author is you can have adult stuff there, such as, oh, and I like very much to go camping out in the wilderness. Here's a moose or something like that, have it fun, figure out what you want to do. So there are elements to the media kit, and in the book, I talk about it. And I also have a special that's running that I will give you guys, that you get the media kit course. People used to pay $197 for this. For you folks, you get it for free because you're listening to Laura, and we'll be giving you that information later on. But the media kit course I built because I was struggling to get guests that understood what I needed so I could promote them well. So I hope that kind of helps you with what is a media kit. It basically is helping your podcaster be able to really promote you well, and then you will do the same in return for their show.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that media kit course. People are saying in the chat box how wonderful. That's a really lovely surprise, and we'll get that info from you, and we'll be sure to send it out with the replay as well. So if there's a link, we'll have that with the replay. That's very generous. I do appreciate media kits when I have guests who have a full media kit, the different headshots to choose from, different lengths of bios. You have like 3 different lengths of bios in your media kit. I love that. Even sample questions, interview questions is always helpful. And when authors have that, or if authors have a lot of books and they have, really good photos of their book covers and it's all in one place, and I can just go pluck it and put it on a slide. So nice. And it's a subtle thing, but then I think, oh, this is a pro. This person's going to be easy to interview because they've done this before. They know what they're doing. And it puts me at ease too. It's very nice to see that. So
it is. And I'd love to be able to chat with you a little bit about those different bios. Please realize your podcasters and people like Laura who have a multitude of platforms that they're working on. Sometimes I love the long bio. I just can't fit it in with the word count that's required from a certain platform. So realize your bio may be used, the short bio may be used in a lot of the printed areas of social platforms, but the long bio may be what she actually uses to introduce you. And that way we get your whole story. But then you have a 150 character bio. And guess what platform that is? I saw you guys talking about in the chat before I came on. Twitter. Twitter has extended its ability because we were too limited by 144 characters. Still, we only get 214. Okay. I mean, it's not like we have a lot to work with there. So you want to make sure that you have that 150 character bio for anyone who might be promoting you on their Twitter platform. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I apologize for my dog wandering out there. She normally stays right at my feet, but tonight she was antsy. So
well, I wouldn't worry about that. I was hopeful that you couldn't hear my kids as they came in through the door from school. So we're both kind of working with family here.
We are. We're all family businesses here. So we know how this goes. I often have guests who have cats and they sort of wander across the desk during the interview. It's fine.
Wonderful.
All right. So you had talked about tips for being a good guest, things that people can tweak just a little bit. What are some of those things? Can you give us a couple tips tonight?
Wonderful. Yeah. And what you're going to love is if you self-label as an introvert or an omnivert, I've heard that one too. I don't care how you choose to label yourself, but this really caters to those introverts and those folks who bounce back and forth between extrovertism and introvertism. And that is when you are getting ready to be on a podcast, kind of set it up in your calendar so that the day that you are interviewed, that as soon as you're done with the interview, give yourself a break of about an hour so that you can go onto your social media. And while you're being interviewed by somebody, ask them to smile or whatever, take a screenshot. You don't have to make it big. You don't have to make it fancy. Just take a screenshot and say on your social media, hey, I had a great time today as Laura Bax was kind enough to have me on the, Kidlit writing, blah, 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 put whatever you need to, hashtags, that sort of thing. And just support the person who is doing you a favor of allowing them to speak to your community. That's step one. It's really easy. If you want, you can keep it to 3 platforms. You can keep it to Facebook, you can keep it to Instagram and to Twitter. I have a huge LinkedIn presence, so I do Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So it just depends on what your thing is. A lot of children's authors have really big Instagram accounts. So go where your people are, okay, whatever that happens to be for you. The second thing is it never hurts to write a thank you note. And I am still surprised that I have people write me back and go, oh my gosh, I've had 213 guests in the last 2 years, and you were the first person to write a thank you note to me, and I get it in the mail. So this is something that is going to set you apart. And it does not have to be extravagant. Just write a few lines, make sure you get the address of your person, and then send that off. Now, one of the things that I like to share with people is I always send brownies because I have this group. And so Laura will be receiving brownies and she can show you picture of these brownies later. But it's just something that I enjoy doing because I know how much work a person will put in, and they're letting me speak to their people. And I'm always so very appreciative of being able to serve other communities in that way. The third and last thing is once your video goes out or once your episode goes out, you promote it again. And if you have a website that will allow you to do this, make sure you write an article and make a story based upon that particular podcast for yourself, and then cross-link it with your other person's website. This raises the SEO of both people. because you are cross-linking with your host website. They are obviously, Google and its infinite wisdom and its AI is going to determine this host is obviously doing a lot of stuff because they have over 278 guests who have tied into their kit. And also, there's always a story. There's always something that happens on a podcast. There's always something that you can comment on, and you can set that article up, let your host know, look, this is how I've set you up. This is how I did the links. And that way you guys are cross-linking back and forth to each other. This is what we call win-win-win. So it's a win for the author. It's a win for the host. And most importantly, it's a win for the audiences that you both cater to.
Great. Excellent advice. Thank you so much. And I am looking forward to the brownies. Now I'm very excited.
I was supposed to be a surprise, but since we're talking about this,
I'll act surprised when they arrive.
Act surprised when you get it. That's great.
Yes. So when you're approaching a podcast to be a guest, is it important that you present yourself as someone who will appeal to the podcaster's audience, existing audience? So a lot of podcasts have a theme that they work within. So do you need to, instead of just saying, I have a new book out, I'd like to talk about it on your podcast, how can you make yourself an appealing guest to the podcaster?
Okay. So first of all, don't worry about that. Everybody kind of gets a little nervous about that. It's true. You do want to cater to the podcast audience. However, you're putting yourself in a box before you've had an opportunity to reveal to yourself all the things you can talk about. So let's talk about, in the book, I say, make your list. And so one of the things you're going to learn is that write a list of everything you can talk about. My list actually took me 5 pages. I had 5 pages front and back of all the things that I could talk about. And I know you're the same. Think about all the things that you've had to research for your books. There are so many topics that you can talk about. And then what you do is you take your top 10 favorite things you want to talk about. And then with that top 10 favorite things, then you break that down and you mash it together so that you have 3 really powerful things that you can bring to an audience that is going to make their life easier. They're going to get more done faster. You're going to save them money, or you're going to assist them with their mental health. Okay. In some way, you're going to create these aspects for them. And you make those 3 powerful presentations, if you will. You don't have to do a PowerPoint. I do, because I'm a college professor. And if I build a PowerPoint, I can talk about that baby, whether I have slides or not, right? Whatever your process is, go ahead and use that. And so you go ahead and you have those 3 major topics, which Laura can say in my media kit, I had, these is a workshop. This is what I talk about, blah, blah, blah. And once you have that, then when you go to present yourself to a podcaster, I highly recommend that you make sure you've listened to at least 1 episode of somebody who is similar to what you want to chat about. And once you listen to that episode, you can talk about how that particular guest was really good because they had points A, B, C, and you would like to embellish on what that particular guest talked about with points G, F, and I. So however you want to do that.
Right.
Okay. So that is how you go about doing that. And in my book, I have email scripts that you can actually send out that work very effectively. Just realize podcasters are insanely busy people like yourself, and they receive requests, and you are having to work against. There are organizations out there. I got called the other day by somebody who said, would you like to be on a podcast episode? And my answer is, of course, yes. Where may I go to be on a podcast episode? And they said, you too can get on 45 different podcast episodes for a mere $20,000. And I went, really? I think I'll go buy a new car with that, with that money. It cost me about $3,000 to publish a book. You realize how many books I can publish? I can publish 7 books for that amount of money, right? So that's where my brain went to on that. So realize we have agencies that reach out to us, especially when we get to a certain tier point on our podcast programs or our radio shows. And so you're up against those agents. And so when you come in as I am the author, you're already up a level because I'm not having to deal with an agent. I'm actually dealing with the author. So don't think that is a negative to you. That's actually a positive. Okay. So I just wanted to make that clear because we have agencies that reach out to us. We have the guests on our shows. The guests do absolutely no cross promotion. Why? They don't know. They don't know they're supposed to because the agency was the one that did that. So just be aware that we're getting a lot of requests and they're having to filter out who's an author, who's direct, who's an agent, those sorts of things. Okay.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you. That's awesome. And by the way, if anybody has questions for Janine, put them in the Q&A and we'll get to those in just a minute. So how do I find out where these podcasts are? Are there lists somewhere of podcasts that and then contact info for the person who I should be contacting to be booked as a guest? Where do I find this information?
Okay, so once again, after 2020, this was not so much a big deal in 2019, but 2020 kind of was a big reboot to everything, right? So, all right, you now have agencies that are compiling lists, but they're not compiling lists for you. They're compiling lists for other advertising agencies. So you kind of have to be careful when you're moving into that. I actually thought I had found a list and I was very excited because I knew I was going to be doing this book and I would be on these speaking tours with this book. And so I was this question is asked to me every time I speak. So I thought, oh my gosh, I found one. And I raced over and I became a member and I was thinking about putting my $20 in a month just so I could kind of test it out for my people. And I got contacted by the admin. They said, you're not who we're interested in. I went, excuse me? I have 4 podcast programs. They're like, no. We know you have podcast programs, but this is for advertising agencies. We don't want you podcasters in there. We cater to a very different demographic. I have had that happen to me 3 times.
Oh, wow.
So I now understand that when you see, hey, this is a list of podcasters, I am not the demographic they're after. So be careful with your money because I know how budget conscious you must be to make choices in your marketing and promotion campaigns. So what do? Well, you have readers. I hope you do anyway. I hope you've been using beta readers. I hope you guys have been listening, using beta readers. You have a group, an email group. I don't care if you only have 68 people on your email list or 40, or maybe it's just you and your mom. I'm joking. We all start with us and one other person, the web designer or something like that. But we all start at 0, right? So as you build your list, and no matter how small or how big it is, I want you, before you go anywhere or look on any site, I want you to ask your readers, who do you listen to on podcasts? And who do you like? And who do you think is the best? I have managed to get on so many podcast episodes because I said to them, hi, I'm Janine Bolon. I have book XYZ. And one of my readers recommended I reach out to you because they thought I would be a good fit for your show. They had listened to episode XYZ and they thought my book would be a good supplement to guest ABC. Okay, so you really, do you see how this is why I'm contacting you? We've listened to your show and here's proof that we've listened to your show. We actually know something about the show. That's very engaging. Okay. So that's kind of step 1. So first, reach out to your readers. Number 2, when you are on a Zoom call like this, or the Happy Neighborhood Project, or a networking group, or a collaboration, whatever, when they open up the mic and you say, hi, I'm so-and-so and I write books and blah, 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 whatever your introduction is, make sure before you finish up, you say, and I'm looking to get on podcast episodes. Is anyone looking for a guest? Now, I was on a networking group that had 57 people. Little did I know, 21 of those people had podcast programs. You may not even be aware. Now, I was embarrassed because 5 of those people I had known for over 7 years and had no idea they had podcast programs. That's how good a friend I am, right? So reach out on your neighborhood project or your collaboration, make sure that you go in and ask every time you're on some sort of Zoom meeting, hey, do you know of anybody who has a podcast? Can you make an introduction? Blah, blah, blah. And then you go listen to those people when that introduction happens. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So see, we haven't had to go anywhere but where you already are.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how they have that metaphor about don't go looking for diamonds, out in Alaska when you have a backyard. You may have diamonds in your backyard, and your backyard actually has a lot of diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that's not enough for you, then what you can do is you can go on to iTunes or Spotify, and you can look up different podcast programs and go through those podcast programs and see who actually has lists of guests that actually is looking for guests. But that is very time consuming. And I have not had as much traction doing that. When I meet people in the blue like that, I've had all manner of reactions coming back at me that I was just like, I can't deal with other people's emotional problems right now. I'm just trying to get on a podcast program. I'm not trying to learn the Social Security number. I mean, I ran into all kinds of reactions. So I really recommend you stick into your own backyard and do it that way rather than trying to reach out cold. It's almost like cold calling. It's just traumatic. It's traumatic for you. And I don't want you to have all that negativity come back at you. Yeah.
Sure. Well, and when you were talking about, how you ask the people what they listen to, you go look at some other episodes, you use that as your way in when you're contacting the host. That's very similar to how you would research a potential agent or editor for your manuscript. And so authors, you're already doing that, or you should be. So this is just an extension of really the same type of research skills, but making that connection, telling them why am I approaching you? Here's why I'd be a good fit. So it's a very similar process. Is it important to focus your efforts on the podcasts with the biggest listenership in your list? Or is it more important that you feel you're a good fit for that particular podcast and whatever listeners they have are going to get you? Is it more important that the people who hear you get you or like what you're saying than that you have, thousands and thousands of listeners?
I have been on small podcasts and I have been on podcasts that had over 250,000 people that download it. And what I find amazing is that I had bigger spikes in my people hitting my website and all, but it doesn't really matter. I really encourage you to go after, if it's kind of like an editor. When you find an editor and they say yes, you're so grateful. You're so appreciative of that editor. You hang on with both fists, even if you hate what they tell you, right? It's like, I have an editor because, it took a process to get there. So I have been on, this is still one of my favorite stories to tell. I was on a podcast because they put out a blast on Facebook and they said, hey, we're starting a podcast. We'd love to have you on. If you know anything about business, well, you're an author, you're a business owner, you're marketing, you're writing, come on, you're a business, right?
Right.
And if you know anything about business, we need some help. And it was the Professional Pool Association. So a Professional Pool Cleaners Association. There we go. And it was Pool Pros was the name of the podcast. And I thought, I have no idea. I went ahead, I said, sure, I'll be glad to talk. And I had some tips that would help their people. And we had a wonderful podcast program. I ended up doing a boot camp for professional pool cleaners for 2 hours. They paid me $37 a head to come in, and I would talk to them for 2 hours on how to help them with prospecting and building their business and marketing their business using almost identical principles to what I'm teaching and sharing with you today. And so you never know. That's why you list off all the things that you can talk about, right? I could talk to a pool cleaner because whether you're selling books or you're selling services, it's all pretty much the same. It's treating people like you appreciate them, like you're compassionate to whatever challenge they're going through, and you have a solution for them, even if Your solution is a novel that will take them out of their reality for that 5 hours it takes them to read. And that is valuable, says somebody
Yes.
who's addicted to novels. Okay.
Excellent. Well, that's awesome. So you mentioned before that, there are some things you can do after the podcast to help promote, cross promote with your host and yourself. Are there other things? Is there anything else that you could think of just off the top of your head that authors could do to sort of leverage that opportunity after the fact? Is it good to link, for example, on their website or their blog or whatever, to link to the podcast episode? Things like that they can
Okay.
do.
Well, there are two or three things that you had mentioned, and I want to make sure we cover them before the top of the hour hits. The first thing is, you had asked me, how do you go about kind of pitching your book without being salesy on a
Right,
podcast? And so
right.
we haven't talked about that yet. And I wanted to cover that because that's a
Sure.
very
It is a
excellent
good one.
question you asked me on the document you gave me. The first one is, what you do is when you're talking about stuff that you know, and somebody answers a question, or asks you a question, and you're saying, well, in my book, Author Podcasting, I talk about in chapter 5 how blah, blah, blah. And then you give them all the information that they asked you for. That's not being salesy. It's like, the reference is my book. And in chapter 5, I talk about XYZ. And by the way, here's the content. So that's not salesy, because you're not saying, oh, dangle carrot, you don't get the content, you have to buy the book for it. That's salesy. But you're giving content, and they will be more than happy to buy the book at that point. So that's how you share it. Now, for folks who are nonfiction, fiction authors, I'm nonfiction. For fiction authors, what is wonderful about you guys is you can say in your book, and then you can talk about your character and how a character had a problem and how that character solved it. So you can talk just as easy as a nonfiction author in that regard. And I've had others say, well, I don't know what to give away for free. Okay. You know all that research you've been doing? Did you know that you can post that on your website, on your blogs, and people love learning your process? Do you know how valuable that is? And one of the best things that you can give them is something that's not in the book, that you wrote only for you. You had a character you loved, and you didn't want to let that character go because, Detective Frost was kind of your boyfriend. Or am I the only one that writes this way? Detective Frost was there for you at 2 a.m. when you were feeling really down, and he was there talking to you, telling you were a pretty all right person. So Detective Frost is kind of your guy. And you go ahead and you write out that character sketch, where he lives, the type of clothing he likes, all that stuff. You give that away for free. People will love you for it, because you're allowing them into the head of a character that you kept hidden in the book because you couldn't give too much away of Detective Frost. Otherwise, the mystery would have been solved too soon. So those are some fun things I'd like to share with you. But when it comes to how do you go about leveraging what's happening as far as the promotion and that sort of thing, the number one thing that you can do after the stuff we've already talked about, an additional thing that I highly recommend, is keep a list of every podcast you've ever been on, and you have one page of your website that says media appearances. And you go to there and people can see all the podcasts you've ever been on. And you will see Pool Pros podcast on my one website. Why? Because I'm so proud of that one. It was just so out there relative to anything I'd ever done. And it's the one I'm most proud of because I was able to help a demographic I never in a million years would have ever reached out to if it hadn't been for that silly Facebook post. So that's one thing, is to definitely have a page where you have media appearances. Last item I want to say on this follow-up thing. Keep track of your podcasters, keep track of the content information. And after you're done with the podcast, whatever day that you guys record it, make sure that you put in your calendar 6 months in the future and reach back around to that podcaster. It is ever so much easier to do a second interview with somebody I know than it is to have to do an interview with somebody I've never met. And I love repeat guests, because you guys are multifaceted. You are multidimensional. There is so much to your personality. Don't think you don't have content just oozing out of you all the time that we would love to have. And so that's just, make sure you reach back to every podcaster in 6 months and say, hey, I know that you schedule things out far, in the future. I'm just wondering, when is your next season, and when would you consider it appropriate to have me on the show again? And sometimes I've had podcasters say, I don't do repeat guests except every year. However, we really got a good response from what you taught or what you shared, and we would love to have you back again. We're going to break our own rules. I've had that 92% of the time.
Wow.
Seriously, over 90% of the time. Why? Because I reached back around. I was pleasant about it. Hey, I know you're busy, blah, blah, blah. Can I help you? Can I be a guest? Can I do this? And then the other way you can say it is if they say, no, not at this time, not interested, you write back, hey, if you ever have an emergency cancellation and somebody isn't showing, please put me on the top of the wait list and I will be there for you. To which a podcaster goes, oh my God, somebody who understands.
That's awesome. It's so valuable. Yes, yes. That is great. That is great. Because there's only so many friends we can reach out to and say, can you come on tonight, please?
They got food, because there's legitimate reasons why people cancel, like
Sure.
funerals and illnesses and work unrelated. There's so many things that happen. And boy, we get to see the entire human condition as podcasters.
Wow, that's great. Well, before we get to a couple questions here, can you tell us a little bit more about what your services for authors, the things you do to help authors promote? I know you've got 3 podcasts, one of which is focused on conversations with writers, correct?
Right. So this is something funny. Everything Laura told you is correct as of 3 weeks ago, and she would not have known. But we got syndicated. We got picked up. So all 4 of my podcast programs got syndicated. What does that mean? It means a radio station said, we want to buy your content.
Wow.
And so we are now on 2 different radio stations that broadcast to 4 different states. And we are on 42 internet-based platforms. So we tripled our reach to people like overnight. What this means for my people is that we're in the middle of transition. So I am now officially a radio show host on 2 different radio stations. We're signing a 3rd that's up in Idaho. And so what this means for you is that my services are now triple what they used to be. So we're now a tier 1 radio show, which is really nice. Tier 1 meaning you have hundreds of thousands of listeners. So I would be happy to have you on. You have the ability to buy time. And so I'm a paid to play personality, because I have 7 pre and post-production teams that work with me to get your content out there. So when you're ready, so play around, goof off on all the free podcasts first, play around with all that. But when you're ready to really get serious and you're ready to implement some intense tactics to your marketing plan, definitely reach out to me so I can work with you a little bit. And then I do have some podcast marketing boot camps that are coming in 2022 that you can sign up for, and I'll be glad to help you that way. So, but for the most part, stick with the little stuff first and get your feet wet, get used to your systems, and then reach out to me in about 6 months when you're ready to really hit it big. Yeah.
Terrific. Well, congratulations on
thank you. Yeah, it was a shock.
hitting the big time. So big. That's really amazing. That's wonderful. So you covered so much great information tonight. We only have a couple questions, and they're both, and I think that both people asked this before I asked you how to research podcasts that are appropriate, for to be a guest on. So that's what both of those questions were about, and you covered that quite well. But one person is a picture book writer, and what's interesting about, well, actually, really any children's book writers, our readers are kids, but the people who are probably listening to the podcasts are going to be the grown-ups. So do we have to be a little sneaky about that?
No, you don't have to be sneaky at all. The kids are not the ones buying the books.
Right.
So for me, I always get, when people say, yeah, but I'm a children's author, and I'm like, you need to cater to the kids too. You're like a veterinarian. All right. You may work on animals, but who paying the bill for that animal? That's the person, the human being on the other side. So when people say, oh, I don't have very good people skills, I guess I'll be a veterinarian. I'm like, okay, buddy, I hate to tell you this, but you're gonna have to deal with people. So that's the thing. However, but as a children's author, you have to do so much more research. You are constantly figuring out how kids see, how the 5 different senses. Your book paper has to be a certain kind of texture. Oh, you guys have to think in terms that most adults don't even think about. And so what I recommend is you talk about other children's authors, such as, I love Eric Carlisle because he inspired me to make my own paper as an artist. I had never seen anyone make their own paper. And what I mean by that is I take my copy paper that comes out of my printer and I spray paint it gold and I spray paint it back and I etch on it. And I would have never been inspired with that if I hadn't seen how Eric Carlisle, I think I may pronounce his name wrong. Thank you. Thank you. Eric, our man Eric, if I hadn't ever seen a documentary that showed what he was doing, which is why it's so important that you share with your listeners and your readers, whether they're adults or kids, how you do your process, because you don't know who you're going to inspire or how. I mean, Eric is never going to know about me, but at the same time, he has inspired me. And so I share all that information with anybody that cares to listen when they're talking to me about how do I illustrate some of my books. Okay. So that's just one of many things that people can do. And I hope it's helpful to you guys. Yeah.
Terrific. That's wonderful. Thank you. Susan asked, do you have suggestions on starting our own podcast?
Okay. Yeah. I have a lot of people that say that. Unless you wake up at 2:30 in the morning and you're like, I need to have a podcast. I mean, it's got to be intense. I would not do that. Authors are always thinking of new ways to promote themselves, but you need to be at a certain level. And I don't know where she is. I don't know where you are as an author, but I would recommend that you not focus on podcasting and focus on being the world's best guest. And then maybe collect a bunch of the podcasters that you enjoyed working with and then refer them to each other to be guests on each other's shows. That is a service that will endear you to so many people. So focus more on being of service to the podcaster rather than doing a podcast program, because podcasting is incredibly time intensive. And if you're struggling to find time to write and research and do your thing, your art, your craft, I don't know if you want to put on, okay, I'm now going to start playing the piano for concerts, which is really where you're going. I don't want to downplay it. It's just, as a podcaster, I need really good guests. So do you mind like really focusing on your guests, being a guest? That's being selfish on my part.
No,
self-serving.
It's very good advice. It's very good advice, because I know people who have started podcasts, and you're right, it's very time consuming. And then you have to promote the podcast so that people will listen to it.
You're right back where you started. And it's like, just get really good at your books. And you all know this probably already. How do you sell book number 1? By writing book number 2. How do you sell book 1 and 2? By writing book number 3. And so you just keep writing those books, and guess what? You're going to get noticed. And so that I really encourage people to stick to that skill set rather than starting your own podcast. But you hear it so much. Oh, you know what you need? You need to start a podcast. Why do you recommend that? And then I always really dig into that person's particular life. And I find that the people that are offering that suggestion really don't operate the way you do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Janine, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for all of this information. I know you were going to give me the info for people to get your Media Kit course, and we will, as I said, we will send that out with the replay. And I don't know if you want to put that in the chat box right now or not. Oh, she did. Excellent. There's a link in the chat box. And so if you're here live, you can see that. And oops, you sent that to hosts and panelists. Can you resend that and pull down the
I
little
got you, everyone.
tab that
I got
says
too quick for my
everyone?
own britches.
Yes,
Okay.
I know. I do that all the time.
There you go.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And so those of you who are here live, you can see that. And if you're watching on replay, it will be right below the video. So we've got that covered. So again, thank you so much. So much information. I learned a ton, and I'm actually starting to reach out to podcasters myself to be a guest. So this was as much for me as for everybody listening tonight.
Definitely reach out to me. And when I'm offering the free media kit for you guys, if you can't find it easily under services or something like that, feel free to just hit contact us and send me an email, and I'll fire that off to you, because I'm sitting here trying to remember. Oh, did I forget to put that on there easy? I may have. So anyway, don't worry, we'll take care of you. And if you buy the book, or if you get the ebook, you'll get it in there as well. It's free in there as well, because you guys are very important to me.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, this has been a delight, and best of luck with your expanded company there. That's just terrific. So, and thank you all for being here tonight, and we will see you we'll see you the first Tuesday in November, I guess, because we're getting toward the end of October here. We'll see you then. So good night, everybody.